Joining us now to talk more about this is Rob Gillezeau, Assistant Professor of Economic Analysis and Policy at the University of Toronto. Rob, leaders here in Canada and China have taken a number of measures to retaliate. Mexico has also vowed to do the same, and we're seeing the impact on the stock market. Do you think this will get Trump to rethink his decision?
I mean, that's a great question, right? If Donald Trump was being rational, if he cared about the economy, if he cared about the welfare of people, right, he would have known not to do this in the first place. So I would, I'd like to think that, as retaliation comes, he would respond. But, it's not obvious. That's not to say that it's not the right thing to do. Right. Obviously, when you get ganged up on, and especially when there's a threat to Canadian sovereignty, right, we obviously need to push back. And hopefully it gets him to back off. But at a minimum, right, it will show him that regardless of whether or not he drops the tariffs, that you can't threaten Canada. You can't threaten the country's sovereignty. And if you do so, Canadians are willing to push back and feel some pain to protect ourselves.
What can we expect from Trump next?
I mean, he's an unpredictable human being. He has threatened to further escalate the trade war, right? So after we had fairly moderate retaliation that came back from Canada and from China, our game plan is to roll up our retaliation, which is a totally appropriate way to do it. Yeah. Trump is already talking about escalating on the American side. And that's going to take a trade war that hurts everyone, and it's going to make it worse. So I don't know. He signaled that what his end game is. That is an interesting question. I mean, it's already out of hand, right? This should have never happened in the first place. Completely reckless behavior from the United States. Canada doesn't have any ability to turn this off, right? This is entirely American driven. It has nothing to do with anything Canada has done. And it's up to the United States. So at this point, I think early on, we maybe thought that Donald Trump was seeking a domestic political win, right? He wanted to send a signal around illegal immigration and fentanyl. Obviously it's not real, right? This has nothing to do with Canada. And initially we lightly pushed back and said, look, we're good friends. We should keep trading. He kept pushing. We said, okay, we'll pretend this is real and we'll appease you. But now that he's sticking with it, right, I feel like he likely has one of two objectives in mind. The first is that he has this very large tax cut agenda where he's mainly cutting taxes for high-income earners in the United States, and he might want to fund that with tariffs, in which case he's essentially hurting Canada, hurting Mexico, hurting his own people, especially working-class Americans, to fund tax cuts at the top. That's the good option. The bad option is that he's actually trying to inflict escalating pain on Canada, either as a threat to our sovereignty or because he doesn't really seem to like other democracies, right? And he seems to be realigning the United States politically and he seems to want Western democracies to be weaker. So they're both really bad options.
What do you think about Canada's response and reaction from all the provincial leaders? Do you feel there's a different way we can approach this?
I mean, there are certainly different ways we can approach it. I think the approach has been pretty reasonable, right? You want to, signal you will push back, and I think we've done that effectively. And you don't want to use all of your cards at once, right? We want to get the Americans to back off, and we do that by imposing pain to them. Certainly, it hurts us as well, but sending a signal, yeah, we will go through a tough situation to impose pain on you for your bad behavior, such that we can hopefully get back to normal. That is a good play. But you want to start off with that pain being low and then escalate it. So in terms of the overarching design of Canada's response, I think it's pretty good. I think everybody appreciates that the provinces are kind of gung-ho and they want to do their part. Ideally going forward, we're coordinated. Right. So we had these broad initial responses, when we start talking about using energy as a tool that is one of our best tools to inflict pain on the United States in this trade dispute. So those need to be coordinated and ideally used late in the game if we get to that point.
The Bank of Canada's next interest rate decision is expected soon. How do you think these tariffs will impact the decision?
One, these tariffs are going to cause a recession in all likelihood, certainly in Canada, potentially also in the United States. And so if you have a normal recession, the bank's job is pretty easy, right? They would say, okay, demand is collapsing. We are going to have expansionary monetary policy, bring down interest rates to deal with that. That's lovely, right? That's an easy world. I think if that's the situation, the bank will be relatively happy and they have the right tools to use. There is a possibility that where the supply side shock as a result of these tariffs might be large enough that we have called stagflation, we have a recession and we have high interest rates. that's a really dangerous spiral. The bank is in a very limited position if that occurs. And so we basically need to look to the data in the weeks and months ahead to see which one we're in. I think the initial indicators are that we're in the easier scenario, fingers crossed, in which case we would expect probably a jumbo rate cut in the next announcement. But if the bank is worried about stagflation, right, they might be less active than people are anticipating.